What if I told you that within just a few months, the grocery store shelves you've relied on for years could be completely bare of your most trusted items? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. According to the latest data from the USDA and multiple industry insiders, we're staring down the barrel of a massive grocery crisis that will hit hardest by March 2025. And let me tell you, it's not just a few product shortages here and there. This is a full-blown supply chain meltdown. We're talking about essentials that will be impossible to find and prices on some of your favorite items soaring to jaw-dropping levels. You've seen inflation rise, but this is on another level entirely. Global production disruptions, catastrophic weather events, and economic instability have set the stage for these everyday items to vanish completely. Experts predict that if you don't start preparing now, you'll be fighting for what's left. And by the time you realize it's too late, those pantry staples will be more expensive than ever, or gone altogether. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about scarcity, it's about survival. The World Trade Organization has already reported a 23% rise in global supply chain disruptions since last year, and we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Major farming regions across the globe are being ravaged by extreme weather, crop diseases, and unprecedented natural disasters. The situation is so dire that the market for some of these items could shift from everyday groceries to luxury goods, and not in the way you'd hope. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what's vanishing, why it's happening, and how you can prepare yourself to weather the storm ahead. Trust me, by the time you reach number 1 on this list, you'll be making emergency plans for your pantry. Keep watching. You won't believe what's coming. 30. Wheat flour. If you've noticed your local grocery store's flour aisle looking a bit empty lately, get ready for a shocker. Wheat flour, an essential pantry staple, could be gone before March 2025 due to severe droughts and unpredictable weather patterns hammering major wheat-producing regions across the globe. The U.S. alone has seen a 35% decrease in winter wheat yields in key farming states like Kansas and Oklahoma, with satellite data showing over 60% of the wheat fields suffering from dry conditions and heat stress. But it's not just about the U.S. Europe's wheat harvest has been hit by catastrophic floods in Germany and France. On top of that, Russia, the world's largest wheat exporter, has imposed heavy tariffs, disrupting global supply chains even further. Combine that with the skyrocketing costs of fertilizers, up 40% in just the last year, and it's no surprise that flour prices are soaring. Some experts are predicting a 60% increase in flour costs by March, with many grocery chains already limiting sales to 1 or 2 bags per customer. So if you're thinking about stocking up, now might be the time. Whole wheat flour in particular has a shelf life of up to a year when stored in airtight containers, so buying in bulk could be a wise move. Otherwise, by the spring, you may find yourself baking bread at luxury prices. 29. Peanut butter. Peanut butter, that beloved comfort food, might soon be more elusive than a perfect sandwich spread. The reason? A perfect storm is brewing in the peanut industry. U.S. farmers, who produce over 50% of the world's peanuts, have been hit hard by a severe drought that has decimated crops in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Experts are estimating a 40% drop in peanut harvests this year, and the situation is compounded by the skyrocketing price of fuel, which makes the transportation of peanuts and peanut butter even more expensive. Meanwhile, in China, a massive uptick in demand for peanut products has drained the global peanut supply, further putting a strain on American reserves. But here's the real kicker. Production costs for peanut butter manufacturers have surged 35% since last year, thanks to higher processing costs and labor shortages. This has forced major brands like Jif and Skippy to reduce production, and some local peanut butter makers have already gone out of business due to the financial strain. By early 2025, peanut butter could be an unrecognizable luxury product, with prices potentially jumping as much as 50%. If you want to avoid the shortage, now's the time to stock up, as peanut butter stored in a cool, dark place can last up to a year. 28. Bananas. Let me tell you something about bananas. They're under threat like never before. For the past few years, banana farmers in Central America have been facing an aggressive disease called Panama disease tropical race 4, which is slowly wiping out entire plantations. What's more alarming is that this strain of the fungus is highly resilient to traditional pesticides, making it nearly impossible to contain. Major banana exporting countries like Honduras, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, which supply about 75% of the world's bananas, have seen crop losses of up to 50% in some areas. But the trouble doesn't end there. Extreme weather patterns, including record-breaking storms and intense droughts, have damaged critical farming regions, further exacerbating the banana shortage. Experts predict that by March 2025, we could see a global banana crisis, with prices potentially skyrocketing by 40%. While large supermarket chains may still have bananas on shelves, smaller or regional retailers could experience extended gaps in stock. Your best bet is to keep an eye out for sales and consider alternatives like plantains, which are often grown in different conditions and may remain more available. 27. Pasta. It's the comfort food staple that's been in everyone's pantry since the dawn of time, but pasta could be on the verge of disappearing. Italy, the birthplace of pasta, is facing the worst durum wheat harvest in recent history, with production falling by 35% due to a devastating combination of drought, extreme heat, and crop diseases. Durum wheat, which is the key ingredient in making high-quality pasta, requires consistent weather conditions, and unfortunately, climate change has thrown that out the window. The European Union's durum wheat production, which supplies over 50% of global needs, is also down by 40%. Meanwhile, in North America, the U.S. durum wheat harvest has been significantly reduced due to similar weather issues. The price of durum wheat has already increased by 25%, and manufacturers are passing those costs down to consumers. Major pasta brands like Barilla are already reporting supply shortages, and smaller local producers are facing even steeper challenges. Experts predict pasta prices could rise by as much as 70% by next spring, with specialty pasta shapes and artisanal brands disappearing first. If you can find pasta at current prices, stock up now. It might be your last chance for a while. 26. Bacon. Bacon, the sizzling breakfast delight we all know and love, is facing an uncertain future. Global pork production is experiencing its most significant decline in decades, and the culprit is none other than African swine fever, ASF, a devastating disease that's wiped out millions of pigs in major pork-producing countries like China, the US, and Germany. To make matters worse, rising feed costs, driven by both inflation and crop failures in corn and soybean harvests, are pushing up production costs for pig farmers. The USDA recently reported that pork exports have decreased by 30% in the last quarter, and the price of bacon has already jumped 25% in the past 6 months. In fact, in the coming months, bacon prices could surge by as much as 50%, and availability may be limited as producers scale back production to cope with the increased costs. While larger grocery chains may still have bacon on the shelves, smaller stores and specialty brands will feel the squeeze the hardest. The bacon shortage is expected to peak by early 2025, so if you're a fan of this crispy treat, it's time to start stockpiling. 25. Milk. If you thought milk prices were high before, brace yourself for an even bigger shock. The dairy industry is facing one of its worst crises in decades, and it's about to affect the availability of your daily dairy fix. A combination of factors, including a devastating feed shortage caused by climate change and rising input costs, is putting dairy farms in a stranglehold. Experts report that over 30% of U.S. dairy farms have already gone out of business in the past year, with many more on the brink of collapse. Cows need consistent, high-quality feed to produce milk, and with feed costs up 40% in some regions, many farmers are simply unable to maintain their herds. Meanwhile, inflation and labor shortages have pushed the cost of milk production through the roof. The result? Milk prices are expected to soar by up to 40% by March, and smaller, local dairies may be forced to close shop entirely. The USDA's latest report suggests that milk shortages could become a reality by early spring, particularly for organic and specialty milk products. If you want to avoid paying sky-high prices for your milk in the near future, start buying in bulk now, especially powdered milk, which can be stored for years. 24. Frozen vegetables. It might seem like frozen vegetables are the kind of grocery item that'll always be around. But the truth is, they're in danger. The recent USDA report revealed that the frozen vegetable market has been hit by a twofold crisis: crop failures in key growing regions and rising energy costs. The severe drought conditions across the U.S. have devastated the production of key crops like peas, corn, and spinach, while the rising costs of energy are making it prohibitively expensive to freeze and store produce. Farmers are finding it increasingly difficult to make a profit, with production costs up 50% since last year. Meanwhile, global shipping disruptions have made it harder to import frozen vegetables from abroad, creating a supply crunch that's already being felt at the grocery store level. With frozen vegetable prices expected to rise by as much as 30% in the next few months, and potential shortages becoming more common, it's a good idea to stock up while you still can. And don't forget, properly stored frozen veggies can last up to 12 months in your freezer, so now might be the time to get ahead of the shortage. 23. Cheddar cheese. If you're a fan of cheddar cheese, brace yourself for a significant shortage by early 2025. The cheese industry is currently facing a supply crisis, primarily due to rising production costs and a serious shortage of milk. The USDA recently reported that milk production has dropped by 10% in key dairy states, and with milk prices climbing 30%, cheese manufacturers are struggling to keep up. On top of this, aging cheddar cheese takes time, and the already limited supply has made long-term storage a gamble. Aging facilities, which are crucial for creating those perfect aged cheddars, have been under strain due to rising energy costs and labor shortages. So while fresh cheddar might still be available for a while, expect prices to double, and aged varieties may disappear entirely. But here's the kicker. Cheese exports, especially to Asia, have skyrocketed, further depleting supplies in the U.S. As cheese shortages are predicted to peak by March 2025, your regular blocks of cheddar could become a rarity, and prices could surge up to 75%. To prepare, consider freezing mild cheddar. It works better than sharp, or even exploring local artisan cheeses as potential substitutes. 22. Flour tortillas. Flour tortillas are about to become a luxury item, and no one saw it coming. The rising costs of wheat, combined with severe droughts affecting major wheat-growing areas like Texas and Mexico, are leading to a looming tortilla shortage. Since tortillas are a staple in Mexican and American cuisines, the supply chain is feeling the pressure. Wheat prices have surged due to crop failures, and manufacturers are passing on these increased costs to consumers, with flour tortillas seeing price hikes up to 30%. But the real challenge is transportation. Shipping costs have soared, making it difficult for smaller tortilla manufacturers to distribute their products. Large tortilla brands are already limiting production, and smaller local producers are struggling to keep their doors open. The ripple effect of this crisis is going to hit your taco nights hard. According to industry forecasts, tortilla prices could double by March 2025. If you're a fan of fresh tortillas, stock up now. Flour tortillas freeze well for up to 6 months, so you can keep your taco nights going while prices soar. 21. Chicken. When it comes to protein, chicken has always been the go-to for many families, but that could change drastically in the next few months. The U.S. chicken industry is facing a perfect storm of supply chain disruptions, disease outbreaks, and skyrocketing feed costs that are driving prices through the roof. In particular, the bird flu outbreak that has already wiped out millions of chickens is having a devastating impact on the supply chain. Over 15 million birds have been culled in just the last 6 months due to this highly contagious virus. On top of that, feed costs have jumped by 45%, making it even harder for poultry farmers to turn a profit. The chicken shortage is already evident in many stores, where shelves that were once stocked with a variety of cuts are now barren or carrying premium-priced options. With large producers struggling to keep up with demand, experts predict that chicken prices will climb by up to 50% in the coming months. By March 2025, chicken might not only be more expensive, but also harder to find, especially whole chickens and certain cuts. Now's the time to buy in bulk, freeze, and plan your meals accordingly. 20. Shrimp. Shrimp, the beloved seafood that has long been a staple in American households, is facing an imminent crisis. Global shrimp farms, especially those in Southeast Asia and South America, have been decimated by the dual threats of disease outbreaks and extreme weather. The white spot disease, which has affected millions of shrimp in major farming areas like Thailand and Vietnam, is wreaking havoc on the global supply. Meanwhile, floods and hurricanes have destroyed vast swaths of shrimp farms, particularly in Central America, further compounding the issue. But it's not just about the quantity of shrimp. Climate change has altered ocean temperatures, making it difficult for wild shrimp populations to thrive in the same areas. Shrimp exports, particularly to the U.S., have already dropped by 30%, and prices are expected to rise by 60% by spring 2025. With the rising demand for seafood globally, it's predicted that shrimp could become a luxury item that many can no longer afford. If you're a shrimp lover, it's time to act fast. Stock up on frozen shrimp and be prepared for serious price hikes in the near future. 19. Avocados. If you're a fan of guacamole or just enjoy a slice of avocado on your toast, the next few months are about to change everything. Mexico, the world's largest avocado producer, is facing a catastrophic situation. A combination of cartel violence in key growing regions, severe droughts, and reduced harvests has led to an avocado crisis that's pushing prices sky high. Over the last few months, production has fallen by a staggering 20%, and experts are warning that prices could double by March 2025. The avocado industry is also dealing with an outbreak of pests that is ravaging crops. Avocados, which require precise conditions to grow, have seen a sharp drop in quality, meaning even the fruit that does make it to market is often smaller and more expensive. The ripple effect is already being felt, with restaurants raising prices for avocado-based dishes and major grocery chains implementing purchase limits. This isn't just a seasonal issue. It's a long-term crisis that could affect availability for years to come. If you want to stock up, buying frozen or freeze-dried avocado could be a good alternative. 18. Beef. Beef, the cornerstone of many American meals, is heading toward a major shortage in 2025. The cattle industry is in a precarious position, with droughts in key cattle ranching states like Texas and Oklahoma causing significant herd reductions. Over 3 million cattle have been lost to drought conditions in the last year alone, and farmers are scrambling to find ways to feed and maintain their herds. Meanwhile, global demand for beef, particularly in China, has caused prices to skyrocket, further exacerbating the supply crisis. The beef industry's ability to recover is also hampered by soaring feed costs, which have jumped by over 40% in the last 6 months. As a result, beef prices are predicted to increase by 50% or more by March 2025. Cuts like ribeye and sirloin are expected to be especially hard to find. If you're a beef lover, it's time to get smart and stock up. Freeze your favorite cuts while you can, and consider exploring alternative meats like pork or chicken, which may remain more affordable in the coming months. 17. Ice cream. Imagine walking into your favorite ice cream parlor only to find empty freezers. It might sound impossible, but the global ice cream industry is in serious trouble. Rising dairy costs and ingredient shortages are hitting ice cream manufacturers hard. Milk prices have surged 30%, and with the demand for milk increasing globally, ice cream producers are facing higher production costs across the board. But that's not all. Sugar shortages are creating a perfect storm, making it harder for companies to make their signature sweet treats. Major ice cream brands are already scaling back production, and smaller artisanal ice cream makers are being forced out of the market. Experts predict that by 2025, premium ice cream could see a 40% price increase, with some flavors becoming completely unavailable. If you're craving ice cream, stock up now before prices go through the roof, and consider switching to frozen yogurt, which may be more readily available. 16. Tomatoes. Tomato lovers, brace yourselves. Your favorite sauce or fresh salad topping could become increasingly scarce. The global tomato market is suffering due to a combination of extreme weather, pests, and rising production costs. In the U.S., California's Central Valley, which produces over 95% of the country's processing tomatoes, has been severely impacted by drought and wildfires. Meanwhile, Italy, another major supplier of tomatoes, has faced an unprecedented 30% drop in production due to floods and a fungal infection that has decimated crops. The shortage has already caused tomato prices to rise, with some specialty varieties like San Marzano tomatoes seeing price hikes of 50%. The ripple effect is starting to hit pasta sauces, ketchup, and canned tomatoes, all of which are expected to see significant price increases by March 2025. If you're a fan of fresh tomatoes, now is the time to buy them in bulk and consider canning them for long-term storage. But be prepared for premium prices and potential shortages as the supply chain continues to falter. 15. Pork. If pork is your go-to protein, the next few months could bring some unexpected challenges. The pork industry, already reeling from African swine fever, is now facing a crisis that's expected to worsen by 2025. The U.S. pork industry has seen a 20% reduction in production, and global demand, especially in Asia, is pushing pork prices to new highs. Meanwhile, rising feed costs and limited access to key grains have made it difficult for farmers to maintain their herds. The impact of these disruptions is being felt across the entire pork supply chain, with bacon, sausage, and other pork products set to become even more expensive. Industry experts predict that pork prices could jump by as much as 40% by March 2025, with some cuts disappearing from store shelves altogether. If you want to avoid paying sky-high prices for pork, now might be the time to stock up. 14. Apples. Apples have long been a staple in households across the U.S., but the upcoming months may bring a sharp shift. The apple harvest has been decimated by a combination of unusual weather patterns, with late frosts and drought conditions wreaking havoc on orchards in states like Washington, New York, and Michigan. In fact, the USDA recently reported a 25% drop in apple production across the U.S. alone. These weather disruptions, compounded by rising transportation costs and labor shortages, are creating an apple crisis that is expected to worsen by 2025. The price of apples is already seeing a significant rise, with some varieties increasing by 50%. The worst part? Premium apples like Fuji and Honeycrisp, which require more labor and ideal conditions to grow, will be the first to disappear from shelves. Even those classic Granny Smiths and Galas you love are becoming increasingly scarce. If you're an apple fan, now is the time to grab some extras. Apples store well for several weeks in a cool, dark place, but if you're looking for longer storage, freezing them or making applesauce might be your best bet before the prices skyrocket. 13. Carrots. While you might think of carrots as one of those simple, always available vegetables, the situation is about to change. A growing crisis in carrot production, triggered by droughts and flooding in major farming areas across the U.S. and Europe, is threatening the supply chain. California, which supplies nearly half of the nation's carrots, has reported crop losses of up to 35% in the past year due to unseasonably dry conditions. Simultaneously, other regions like Michigan have been impacted by torrential rains and flooding, ruining crops before they could even reach harvest. As a result, the carrot market is seeing prices rise by 40%, and that's not even the worst part. A major supplier recently warned that some varieties of carrots might become difficult to find in the coming months. With rising input costs for farming, experts predict that by 2025, carrots could be priced higher than ever before, and availability will be patchy. If you're a fan of this versatile vegetable, stock up now or consider freezing them for future use. They freeze well and retain their nutrients for up to a year. 12. Milk alternatives. If you're one of the many people who turn to milk alternatives like almond, oat, or soy milk, brace yourself. The shortage in these products is about to hit full force. Almond production, which is heavily reliant on water-intensive farming in drought-prone regions like California, has taken a major hit this year. In fact, almond farmers have seen a 20% reduction in yields, leading to a significant shortage of almond-based milk. Oat milk, while currently popular, is facing its own set of challenges. Severe weather patterns have caused disruptions to oat farming in key regions like Europe and Canada, and processing plants are struggling to keep up with the demand. Meanwhile, soybeans, a primary ingredient in soy milk, are being hit hard by rising prices for feed and fertilizers, making production costs soar. By March 2025, milk alternatives could see a price hike of up to 60%, with some varieties disappearing entirely from store shelves. The ripple effect is already being felt, with smaller producers unable to keep up with the rising costs and larger brands consolidating their product lines. If you're a fan of milk alternatives, now's the time to stock up. Some of these products can be frozen, and others may last longer in the pantry than you think. 11. Sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes, a nutritional powerhouse and a staple in many households, are about to disappear from store shelves. The U.S. sweet potato industry, which primarily operates in states like North Carolina and Mississippi, has been hit hard by unpredictable weather and pests. This year's crop has been severely damaged by excessive rainfall and flooding, resulting in an expected 30% decrease in yield. On top of this, the global demand for sweet potatoes has been growing, especially in countries like China, where sweet potatoes are in high demand for both culinary and agricultural purposes. As a result, sweet potato prices have already climbed by 25% in some regions, and analysts predict a 40% increase by March 2025. Even more troubling, supply chains have been disrupted by fuel price hikes and shipping delays, meaning sweet potatoes that are available will likely be priced like luxury goods. To avoid paying exorbitant prices, it's wise to stock up on sweet potatoes while you can, or consider looking for alternatives like regular potatoes or other root vegetables, which are still more plentiful and affordable. 10. Potatoes. Potatoes, one of the most basic and beloved food items in the world, are facing a significant shortage, and it's worse than you might think. The U.S. potato harvest has been hit by a series of disasters, including severe drought conditions in Idaho, the nation's leading potato producer, and flooding in other key potato-growing regions. The USDA has reported a 20% decline in yields for this year's crop, and that's not even the worst of it. In Europe, where the potato harvest has also been decimated by extreme weather, prices have already spiked by 30%, and farmers are struggling to meet global demand. With the increase in fuel costs and the price of fertilizers for potato crops rising by 35%, it's predicted that potato prices will increase by another 40% by the spring. This may not just affect the price of fresh potatoes, but also processed potato products, such as chips and frozen fries, which will likely become far more expensive. If you're used to grabbing a few pounds of potatoes at a bargain price, those days might be over. Consider stocking up on potatoes, storing them in a cool, dark place, and even freezing mashed potatoes or fries to stretch your supply for the coming months. 9. Canned goods. Canned goods have long been a pantry staple for emergencies and everyday meals alike. But in the next few months, it might be harder than ever to find your favorite canned foods. A massive shortage of both the raw materials and labor is causing a ripple effect across the canned goods industry. Canning factories are running at only 60% capacity due to labor shortages, and the rising costs of metal, particularly for aluminum cans, have forced many manufacturers to scale back production. While the demand for canned goods has been growing, especially due to food storage for potential future crises, supply chains have struggled to keep up. On top of that, the agricultural sector is facing crop losses, further reducing the availability of key canned goods like vegetables, soups, and beans. As a result, some canned products are already priced 25% higher than last year, and experts predict that prices will rise by another 50% in the coming months. If you're hoping to stock up on canned foods, now is the time. Canned goods have a long shelf life, and if you plan ahead, you'll avoid the looming shortages. 8. Butter. Let's talk about butter, the rich, creamy indulgence that's already seeing an alarming shortage. Global butter production is facing a perfect storm, with a combination of reduced milk production, higher feed costs, and increased energy prices pushing dairy farmers to the brink. The U.S. dairy industry has been particularly hard hit, with some major butter-producing regions like Wisconsin reporting a 25% drop in output. Farmers are struggling to feed their cows due to skyrocketing feed prices, which have increased by 45% over the past year. As a result, butter prices have already risen by 20%, and experts predict that they could rise by as much as 50% by March 2025. Meanwhile, European butter supplies are facing a similar crisis, with countries like France and Germany reporting sharp declines in production. Even high-end butter brands, which are made with the finest cream, are facing shortages, and some grocery chains have already started limiting purchases. If you're a butter lover, it's time to stock up. Butter can be frozen for up to 6 months, so buy in bulk while you still can. 7. Honey. There's no sugarcoating it. Honey is in serious trouble. The global honey supply is under threat due to a combination of factors, including rising temperatures, severe weather, and disease among bee populations. In fact, beekeepers are reporting the worst year for bee losses in decades, with some countries losing as much as 40% of their hives. Meanwhile, extreme weather, including wildfires and floods, has destroyed critical flower fields where bees gather nectar, further reducing honey production. The result is a significant honey shortage, with prices already rising by 25% in some regions. Premium honey varieties like raw or organic honey have seen price hikes of 50%, and experts predict that prices will continue to climb. The honey shortage is expected to hit its peak by early 2025, and by then, honey could become a luxury item. If you want to stock up, raw honey has a long shelf life and doesn't expire, so grab a few jars while you can. It's also a good time to explore honey alternatives, like agave syrup, though nothing quite compares to the golden sweetness of real honey. 6. Olive oil. The olive oil industry is in turmoil, and prices are soaring as a result. Spain, which produces over 40% of the world's olive oil, has been facing one of the worst harvests in modern history. Extreme heat and drought have reduced olive yields by nearly 50%, and the country's olive groves, some of which are centuries old, are struggling to survive. Meanwhile, other major olive oil producers, like Italy and Greece, are also facing production issues due to disease and poor weather. As a result, global olive oil production is down by 30%, and prices are already climbing by 50%. Industry insiders predict that by March 2025, olive oil prices could double, and some varieties may disappear from shelves altogether. If you want to preserve your supply, stock up now. Olive oil has a shelf life of about 18 months, so buying in bulk while it's still affordable could save you a significant amount in the long run. 5. Rice. Rice, a global staple and an essential part of many diets, is on the brink of disappearing from grocery store shelves. The global rice market is facing a severe crisis, fueled by disastrous weather patterns and government policies. In countries like India, where rice exports make up a significant portion of the global supply, the government is implementing export bans to protect domestic reserves, pushing global rice prices up. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the rice-growing regions of Arkansas and California have been devastated by drought and flooding, leading to a massive decline in production. The result? Rice prices have already risen by 25%, and by March 2025, experts predict that prices could triple. If you rely on rice as a staple food, it's time to stock up now before prices become unaffordable or the supply runs out completely. 4. Coffee. If you thought your morning cup of coffee was a simple luxury, think again. Coffee is facing an unprecedented crisis. Global coffee production is in the midst of a perfect storm, with severe heat waves, droughts, and pest infestations devastating coffee-growing regions around the world. Brazil, the largest coffee producer globally, has reported a catastrophic loss of coffee plants due to record-breaking temperatures and drought conditions, reducing production by as much as 40%. In Vietnam, which supplies about 20% of the world's coffee, farmers are struggling with a new super-resistant pest, the coffee borer beetle, which is destroying crops at an alarming rate. And it's not just the beans that are under threat. The coffee infrastructure is also collapsing, as farmers struggle to afford the rising costs of fertilizers and transportation. As a result, coffee futures have soared to record highs, with analysts predicting that by March 2025, coffee prices could rise by 100% or more. Your favorite cafe coffee could go from $5 a cup to $10, and home brewing won't be much cheaper. Stockpiling whole beans, especially high-quality varieties, could be your best bet. When stored in airtight containers, whole beans can last up to 18 months, so buying now could save you from future sticker shock. 3. Olive oil. Olive oil, a staple of Mediterranean diets and a go-to for home cooking, is facing a dire shortage. Spain, which accounts for nearly half of the world's olive oil production, has been hit by an extreme drought that has ravaged its olive groves. Satellite imagery shows that entire regions of Spain's olive-growing lands have turned brown, and many trees have been unable to produce fruit. Italy and Greece, which also supply significant quantities of olive oil, are facing similar issues, with disease and erratic weather patterns wreaking havoc on their harvests. This global olive oil shortage has caused prices to jump by 70% over the last few months, and it's only going to get worse. By early 2025, experts predict that olive oil could cost upwards of $50 per bottle for premium varieties, and even everyday brands might become unaffordable. The situation has become so dire that the EU has implemented an emergency olive oil stockpile, which is already nearly depleted. If you rely on olive oil for cooking, now is the time to stock up. Store it in a cool, dark place, and it will last up to 2 years. But don't wait too long. By March 2025, your pantry's liquid gold may be priced like a luxury item. 2. Eggs. Eggs, a pantry staple for breakfast and baking, are experiencing a serious shortage that could have ripple effects across every corner of the food industry. The highly contagious bird flu has ravaged poultry farms across the U.S., wiping out millions of hens and causing egg production to drop by 25%. The impact of this disease, which is spreading faster than ever before, is particularly severe for free-range and organic eggs, as these chickens are more susceptible to contamination from wild birds. On top of this, rising feed costs, up 40% in the last year, are squeezing egg farmers, many of whom are already closing their doors due to financial strain. The result? Egg prices have already jumped 50%, and industry insiders are predicting that by March 2025, the cost of a dozen eggs could triple, with some regions facing outright shortages. Even egg substitutes, often made from powdered eggs, will be in short supply due to reduced production. If you want to protect your egg supply, stock up now. Eggs can be frozen for up to 6 months, and in times of extreme shortages, you'll be thankful you did. The looming egg crisis is just beginning, and if you don't plan ahead, your breakfasts, and everything that calls for eggs, could become much more expensive and harder to find. 1. Rice. Rice, one of the most consumed staples in the world, is facing a major crisis that could leave grocery store shelves bare. Global rice production is down significantly due to severe weather events, including flooding, droughts, and rising temperatures. In Asia, the world's largest producer and consumer of rice, regions like India and Thailand have seen their crops decimated by unusual weather patterns. India, which accounts for around 40% of global rice exports, is expected to limit its rice exports in 2025 to protect its own food supply, leading to a massive global shortage. Meanwhile, the U.S., which relies on imports to meet domestic demand, is seeing a decline in rice production due to drought and water shortages. As a result, rice prices have already risen by 30%, and by March 2025, prices could more than double, making rice an unaffordable luxury for many. Some experts predict that rice could disappear entirely from some markets, especially premium varieties like basmati and jasmine. The ripple effects will be felt worldwide, impacting everything from packaged meals to restaurants. If you rely on rice as a staple in your diet, it's time to stock up. Rice has an incredible shelf life of up to 2 years if stored in an airtight container, so now is the time to purchase in bulk. Otherwise, expect to face higher prices or go without your favorite rice dishes altogether.